Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday. Apparently Giving Tuesday. Tuesday, November 30th, 2021. Time for another show. I'm going to give you another show. I hope you'll give me a bunch of money. I don't know. Sure, why not? I mean, actually, that's what it's all about. I wouldn't consider myself a charity, although, I don't know. Sometimes, I guess, it feels that way, I'm sure. But if it does, continue to have that feeling. Go ahead, keep giving me money. But, yeah, you're supposed to be out there giving money to charitable causes today, I think, right? Like, not just anybody. So go and do some of that. You'll feel good about it, I am sure. I don't really understand Giving Tuesday, and I'm supposed to by now. I'm, in fact, supposed to be involved in trying to drive some donations locally. Won't bother the rest of you with it, but at any rate, I have to get up to speed on what this thing is. However, I'm too late for this year, so okay. Hopefully the rest of you who know what is going on are prepared to go out and give money in this particular way. I mean, it's good to give money even if you don't get there. Apparently there's a whole thing with like Facebook, whatever, I don't know, and if you give the money in a certain way, something happens and some magical force somewhere might select you by pulling your name out of a hat and match your donation. So that's supposed to encourage you to give more money in case you get chosen to get matched. I guess it's a crapshoot. Well, okay. That sounds nice. I don't think I understand the thing quite all that well, but no point in getting involved in anything with Facebook now and helping them greenwash themselves, if it's a Facebook thing. I don't know. At any rate, I'm aware of the fact that that exists. Not that anybody is tweeting about it in my timeline. They're consumed with other important things, but just thought I would remind you, and if you had made a note to yourself that you were going to give someone money on Giving Tuesday, today is the day. Unless this is your listening in podcast and you missed your chance, but go and give them money anyway because they will appreciate it. Match, no match, what have you. And I don't know, if you hate charities and just want to give money to me, you can always do that at patreon.com/KagroX. And I don't know. So today's not a great day to ask because you're supposed to give your money elsewhere, and I don't like to impinge on that. So I don't know. So stop talking about it. Yes, okay. We'll do that instead and talk about what others of you are talking about. Let's see. What have we here? The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. I've just been informed by Bill. He's in Portland, Maine, so the show must be going on there. How does he know? KagroX, that's me, David Waldman, would like you to know that today's program is sponsored by Acme Ivermectin Scented Hanukkah Candles. Bet you can't light just one. That's right. And why would you? Because they protect you from COVID. No, they don't, YouTube. They do not protect you from COVID. We are not saying that. We don't believe in the use of ivermectin here. The vaccine works. Other shows in which we've also said the vaccine works, but maybe we haven't said it loud enough. The vaccine works. And so now you can stop deleting our shows. I finally did get to file my appeal for the Thanksgiving Day pre-taped show, in which you may recall we read the piece by Talia Lavin, right, who was revealing just how out of bounds. Ooh, that reminds me of something else I need to get to. Just how out of bounds the use of the yellow stars by anti-vaccination and anti-masking fanatics, let's say, here in the United States is trying to compare their plight of being asked to wear a piece of cloth over their face to being held in ghettos and then executed in death camps. You know, it's very similar, of course, to their way of thinking, but not to ours, YouTube. We do not believe in that. Anyway, we were reading about that, and the YouTube artificial intelligence thingamabob, whatever they run everything through, I understand that there's just too much content put up for them to give it human reviews. But, I don't know, in terms of when they pull something, you would think that the AI would flag something and then people would listen, perhaps, but I guess it makes it difficult if the machine just says, somewhere in this 2 hours is something that might be offensive. Anyway, this one was right up at the front of the show, and we were reading the piece saying that this is nonsense, and they took it down. Anyway, we did finally get to make that appeal. I guess the problem really was that I suppose if you ever made an appeal, you have cookies in the machine that makes it impossible to connect properly. And if you clear your cache and cookies and or use a different machine, you can finally file your appeal. So I did that, and maybe they'll realize their mistake in a couple of days like they did last time and reinstate the thing. That would be nice. So I mentioned to you that there was something I wanted to get to, and I remember what it is. I forget how I came to realize that. But at any rate, yes, I don't know. I guess in speaking about something being beyond tolerances, I mentioned yesterday a thought that I had over the weekend about the use of the phrase "beyond the pale," and I'm not terribly serious about this in the sense that I will get upset with people. I'm going to start a campaign to get upset with people for using the phrase "beyond the pale" because it has many possible meanings. But I was wondering whether it is or ought to be considered, at least in one sense. I guess if enough people take offense at it, we can work on this. Take offense to it like the way others do, or now everyone does, to other phrases we've ruled out of our lexicon. I don't know how to illustrate it without actually using it again, except we'll say it's the one where we talk about being either beyond reasonable limits or out and about and out from under control and causing problems. That involves your proximity to a reservation, yes, and Native Americans, Indians taking offense at that because, of course, what were reservations used for, right? And so you're talking about, a bad thing has happened because an Indian has left the reservation. And you get the gist of it. I don't know. I mean, that one makes sense because there's not much use for the word in that sense, in the sense in which it's used in that phrase, other than referring to Native American Indian reservations. And I don't know. There's not a whole lot of other context you can give. So I mentioned the phrase "beyond the pale" in that context, and I got a couple of responses from people who see things in a way that I think is it's legit, and according to all the definitions and etymology, there are interpretations of the phrase that might be considered otherwise harmless. Let's see. For instance, I don't know. Do I want to call out everybody who? They chimed in, and then I kind of disagreed with them. So it's not really like a super positive call out, but I like the fact that they checked things out and participated. So that was of interest to me. All right. Well, we'll just leave it at the fact that at least two folks chimed in and said, well, for instance, one who said a pale that they're referring to here is just a marking stake, right? An area that is delineated for some proper use by the use of these marking stakes. And then if you've gone beyond it, all you've done is, moved past where something. But I mean, it has a very similar connotation, right? Like, why are we interested in whether or not you've passed this marking stake, this pale? And it's because you're now out and about where you're not supposed to be, which has a similar feel to it like the reservation phrase. But and beyond the pale, obviously, also mentioned here. Someone else says it's a very old idiom. The part I want to bring up is that there are many meanings to what the pale actually is. There's one sense in which it can be defined as the boundary markers, and then there are others, and the others refer to the area marked by the various boundary markers, whether they're marked with pales or not. And there's a very specific use of it which is interesting. And apparently, though, it was used in at least two places, according to the Wikipedia discussion of Beyond the Pale. One in English colonized Ireland, which may or may not have exactly the same connotation. But the one I'm thinking of is, as they refer to it, the Pale of Settlement in Imperial Russia. I'll give you the way they phrase it in Wikipedia, and you'll see, I think, where I'm going with this. It is sometimes understood, as they say, to refer specifically either to the English Pale in Ireland as well as the Pale of Settlement in Imperial Russia. The nominally English territory of Ireland, in the England-Ireland scenario, only the Pale fell genuinely under the authority of English law, hence the terms within the Pale and beyond the Pale. And that would explain its use in English, obviously. And I guess you'd have the best argument, well, they probably didn't use the word pale in Russia. They probably had a different word. But at any rate, maybe they did. I don't know. And also there's, it's a little ambiguous. Well, English law, falling under English law, falling under or outside of English law, that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. Certainly Free Irish would say that was a good thing. Being beyond the pale then is a good place to be. But in Imperial Russia, being beyond the pale had different connotation and different consequences. In Russia, as they do note in Wikipedia, Jews were relegated to living in the Pale of Settlement. It was this area, covering I forget how they defined it. And maybe we can find something about it online. I've read about it online elsewhere, but I forget exactly. But there's a whole area of Eastern Europe, I guess Central Eastern Europe, which is considered the Russian Imperial Pale. Jews were allowed to live or work within those boundaries, and when they wandered outside of that, let's say, reserved territory, an area set aside by reservation, you might say, they were in considerable trouble and would find themselves very often, dead. So I thought it was interesting as a possibility. I don't really want to cause more trouble or anything and have more people have to be more politically correct about more things that aren't necessarily worthy of our attention. But I thought it was an interesting inquiry. Should it be thought of? Since we started off with the idea of, maybe it would be beyond the pale, so to speak, in the idiomatic sense, to wear yellow stars just because you don't feel like getting a vaccination and you feel persecuted because people who want you to be vaccinated in order to participate in commerce with them or attend their schools or what have you say, we would prefer you not be, a vector for disease in our building. That is just like being a Jew in the Holocaust. But while we're on the subject, is being beyond the pale, are we talking about the Irish Pale? Are we talking about the Imperial Russian Pale? Are we talking only about the stake? And we're just saying you have physically moved past it, and that carries no meaning. Well, it has to carry some meaning. What's the stake doing there? Why do we care whether I'm on this side or that side of the pale? And what if the answer is, well, if you're a Jew, we'll kill you? No. Well, then maybe that's something we ought to take more seriously, both in studying history and in studying and using language. I don't know. Just making the case out there. We'll see whether anybody else thinks that there ought to be some sensitivity about it. Let's see. Scott has other information here for us. That the fence posts, I guess some of them were pretty sharp because it's also apparently the etymological source of the word impale. Like, if you go beyond the pale, we will kill you with this pale. Well, that's special and worth knowing as well. Here's some information. Thank you, Scott, for information on the Pale of Settlement. That's how you would have to look it up on Wikipedia. We'll share this page with you in the roundup. I guess, does it make any sense for me to say I'll put it in my email to you, Scott, because it belongs in the roundup? You already have it. But anyway, you've sent it to me, and now I have to return the papers physically to you, just like the way it works in Congress in passing laws. The Pale of Settlement, I might as well read to you now from my phone. Let's see. We can see how it's pronounced. They definitely use a different word in Yiddish, for instance. How would this? I'll have to read it in actual Hebrew because the transliteration doesn't make any sense to me. Oh, but it's of course they printed it backwards. Der Techum, I guess. Der Techum ha Moshev. Okay. Or in Hebrew, Tehum HaMoshav, not Moshev. Moshe, of course, Moses. So I guess we're talking about the marker of, where the descendants of Moses, Jews, are allowed to go. So they didn't use the word pale, though, so maybe in English, I don't know. At any rate, but they did have an English term for the Pale of Settlement in Russia as well. It was a western region of the Russian Empire. That would make it, of course, it's confusing sounding. It's Western Russia, but that's Eastern Europe, right? A western region of the Russian Empire with varying borders that existed from 1791 to 1917, and that's like anagrammatic, isn't it? Is it a palindrome as well? Anyway, yeah, I think so. Let's see. During which time the permanent residency by Jews was allowed inside the Pale, and beyond which Jewish residency, permanent or temporary, was mostly forbidden. Mostly they would impale you on these stakes, I guess. Most Jews were still excluded from residency in a number of cities within the Pale as well. By the way, you couldn't live in a nice place inside the Pale. A few Jews were allowed to live outside the area, including those with university education, the ennobled, if there were such, members of the most affluent of the merchant guilds and particular artisans, some military personnel, and some services associated with them, including their families and sometimes their servants. The archaic English term pale is derived from the Latin word palus, a stake, extended to mean the area enclosed by a fence or boundary. The Pale of Settlement included all of modern-day Belarus, Lithuania, and Moldova, much of Ukraine and Poland, and relatively small parts of Latvia and the Western Russian Federation. It extended from the Eastern Pale, or demarcation line inside the country, westwards to the Imperial Russian border with the Kingdom of Prussia, later the German Empire, and Austria-Hungary. Furthermore, it composed about 20% of the territory of European Russia and largely corresponded to the historical lands of the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Cossack Hetmanate, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, and the Ottoman Empire, with Crimean Khanate and Principality of Moldavia. So those of you with knowledge of the ancient maps of Europe will recognize all of that. Life in the Pale for many was economically bleak. Most people relied on small service or artisan work that could not support the number of inhabitants, which resulted in emigration, especially in the late 19th century. Even so, Jewish culture, especially in Yiddish, developed in the shtetls, small villages, as they call them, in Yiddish, and intellectual culture developed in the yeshiva, or religious schools, and was also carried abroad. The Russian Empire during the existence of the Pale was predominantly Orthodox Christian, in contrast to the areas included in the Pale, with its large minorities of Jewish, Roman Catholic, and until mid-19th century Eastern Catholic population, although much of modern Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova are now prominently Eastern Orthodox. While the religious nature of the edicts creating the Pale is clear, conversion to Russian Orthodoxy, the state religion, released individuals from the strictures. Historians argue that the motivations for its creation and maintenance were primarily economic and nationalist in nature. In other words, the war wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. And so the Pale wasn't about religious discrimination, it was economic and nationalist in nature. We, as a nationalist principle, don't like Jews and don't want them involved in our economy. But it's about economics, you see. The end of the enforcement and formal demarcation of the Pale coincided with the beginning of the World War in 1914, World War I, and then ultimately the fall of the Russian Empire in February and October revolutions in 1917. So, Anyway, there's that. If you want to take that into consideration. But I bet you didn't think we were going to spend all that time on that, did you? Although, once I started, it was probably pretty clear that that was likely to be the subject for a little while. There's other stuff out there and things to pay attention to. And, of course, there's also the possibility that all of that 20 minutes was a waste of time because it's well settled in etymology circles somewhere that it's perfectly fine. Although, I don't know, I mean, you can create controversy at any point. How do we know they're perfectly fine? We've been told so? Well, I object. And I want to reopen the subject for further consideration. But not before telling you that, let's see, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a nut, and she's out there being nutty again. Apparently, if she were a Democrat, of course, people would be saying that she threatened the life of noted moderate and totally non-crazy Republican person Nancy Mace, who just yesterday we were pointing out was an idiot because she was going on television telling people that natural immunity, so-called natural immunity, i.e. getting coronavirus, getting COVID, would make you more immune to later reinfection by some 27 times, she said she had read in some study to which she has not pointed anyone. 27 times better immunity, she claimed, YouTube, than the vaccine. Not true as far as I can tell. And of course, by the way, I mean, can we just pause for a second to note that that whole line of thinking about so-called natural immunity is that the best way to avoid getting COVID is to get COVID? Like, okay, if you're going to sign on with that crew for your science, I cannot help you. There's only one bit of information you need to know, and Greg is the one to deliver it. He's not here today, but you know it.
God, get the vaccine already, you fucks.
Yeah, so please do that. Stop thinking about so-called natural immunity. In some places, it can get you around vaccine requirements. I would say it should be viewed as a temporary measure, and you should just go and get the vaccine. But if in the meantime you need to get into the grocery store, fine, go ahead. But you should make plans to get yourself vaccinated and stop depending on so-called natural immunity. It's not 27 times better. It's not any times better. It's 0 times better because it's not better. It might provide some form of protection, but it also might not. And it's pretty well established that the vaccine does, so you should just go and get that instead. Anyway, so that's what Nancy Mace was up to yesterday. But Nancy Mace is also back on the outs with Republicans, even though she bent over backwards to try to stay in with Republicans, as we mentioned, by going on 2 different television programs before 2 different television audiences. One more Republican, during which she said, oh yeah, the vaccine kind of sucks and you'll get better protection from natural immunity. And then she went on a more mainstream one where people who would think that was crazy might see her. And she said, oh yeah, get the vaccine and stay masked. And I'm totally normal and mainstream and moderate. And you don't have to worry about me as a Republican. I'm one of the good ones. But anyway, she's now gotten herself in trouble because something we didn't mention yesterday, because, you know, whatever. I didn't really want to give any more attention to Lauren Boebert, who was also crazy and stupid. And her tale that she told about, I guess her latest stand-up routine when she's trying to raise money is about how tough she is around Ilhan Omar because she's Muslim, and Lauren Boebert is tough and has guns and fights for America. So therefore, of course, in case you wanted to know, what's it like serving in Congress around Muslims who could be terrorists? Because all Muslims, she believes, are terrorists. We don't believe this, YouTube. She does. Lauren Boebert is her name. Ban her if you don't like her. And the story was, well, I'm tough and everything, so every time I see one of them, I get ready to fight for my freedom. Except this time I guess the story she told, she was in an elevator and waiting to go up, and the doors were still open, and here comes Ilhan Omar, and she's going to come into the elevator, and she I don't know, she thought it was like a huge dunk somehow, a big score to tell everybody, I saw her coming, and she's Muslim, so I instantly got afraid. like that's supposed to make you tough. Like you're an awesome, warrior for America if you get afraid when this woman comes near you, because she was born in a Muslim country. She's Muslim herself now, and that, for idiots, equals terrorism. And so she tells the story by saying, well, she looks up, she gets worried, and like, I don't know, her version of it was that I guess a Capitol policeman hustles in there and like tries to warn her off somehow, and let's get out of the elevator. But she looks at her and assesses the situation coolly and calmly and rationally, feeling around on her hip like, is my gun with me or not? And says, well, she doesn't have a backpack, so we'll probably be okay. I.e., that's a bomb, because no Muslim would ever carry anything other than a bomb, right? So there you go. We don't believe this, YouTube. Someone else believes this, and we think it's bad. We're just illustrating how bad it is. Anyway, so that's the story she was telling to the home crowd. Ilhan Omar, of course, said, by the way, if you were interested in knowing what really happens and what it's really like to serve with me in Congress, I did, in fact, ride in an elevator, I think. I don't know whether she said I rode in an elevator with Ilhan Omar or with Lauren Boebert, but I do pass her in the halls. And this tough bitch, as she likes to, portray herself, she looks down when I pass. She's afraid to look up and look me in the eye. And it's because, that for all her tough rhetoric, you would think that a confrontation would be expected, required, anytime that they met one another in the hallway. But instead, all she does is kind of lower her head and shuffle by. She never says anything directly to me. She's afraid to do something like that. That has boiled over, and I guess Boebert, she made a half-assed fake apology. We'll talk more about it later.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess I'll start scrolling back to see if I can find more about what went on with Ilhan Omar and Lauren Boebert, just so I can at least point you to the tweets that I saw over the weekend and give you the background story. I'm not sure I'm retelling it quite correctly, but at any rate, I now understand. There were obviously calls immediately thereafter for Boebert to either be punished or to make some sort of apology or retract her statement. And mostly, of course, it came from Democrats, and then mostly followed up by with comments like, hey, there are no Republicans condemning her, no Republican leadership urging her to retract her statements or make amends for them in any way. Here we are. So let's see. It was Patriot Takes out there covering, I guess, originally my original spotting of the Lauren Boebert tape. I won't play the tape, but Patriot Takes describes it by saying, over the Thanksgiving break, Lauren Boebert said she was recently in a Capitol elevator with Ilhan Omar when a fretful Capitol police officer ran up. Boebert said, well, she doesn't have a backpack. We should be fine. Boebert then goes on in her stupid story to call Ilhan Omar part of the Jihad Squad. So super hilarious and everything. And I was just sort of wondering, when we would hear from Republicans condemning some of this. There was at least one, according to The Hill, one report of a Republican governor saying that Kevin McCarthy should condemn Boebert's anti-Muslim remarks. We can actually follow the links and see who it was. It is the sometimes sort of semi-moderate Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who, very frequently positions himself that way. He's not a great guy, but like some people think of Nancy Mace, she will occasionally take a position that's, moderate looking and reasonable. Asa Hutchinson, I think, a little less frequently getting himself in trouble with dopey remarks certainly less frequent than Lauren Boebert, but a little less frequent even than Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace doesn't have the experience that Asa Hutchinson has. He's been around a while, so he knows mostly how to stay out of trouble unless he wants to be in trouble. Anyway, so I guess he was one of the first Republicans to come out of the gate saying, yeah, that was really wrong, and Republicans should call on Boebert to retract that statement, or all of the statements. I'll mark that one for inclusion in pocket. Then back up. Let's see. So I was also wondering then, it made me wonder, you remember the member of the Spotsylvania County School Board who recently made a splash saying that we ought to burn the books that we want to remove from the library shelves, even though they're not on the library shelves in Spotsylvania County schools. They are part of the digital library, and they are available, in virtual form. But nonetheless, something headlines, burn books. And you remember that we were all surprised to learn, sort of, that this was a 20-something young Lebanese-American person by the name of Rabi Abu Ismail. And it was odd, normally if it wasn't that for the fact that, one, he himself is Republican, and two, that he was aligning himself with prevailing Republican sentiment about where the next round of fights over the school board issues that are credited, rightly or wrongly, with having won the Republican gubernatorial election, where should they go? And as the story was brought up in Spotsylvania County because it was within a week it had devolved perhaps into book burning threats. But if it wasn't for the fact that it was aligned with prevailing Republican sentiment, they might otherwise have said, oh, that's odd, a young Lebanese American and presumably is Muslim elected official is enthusiastically endorsing Taliban tactics here in the United States. One might otherwise ordinarily have feared that as creeping Sharia, but I guess when Sharia creeps alongside MAGAism, it's okay. You're headed in the same direction. We're going the same way here. We might as well go together. But nobody made that observation. But I was wondering whether Abu Ismail had anything to say. Normally, we wouldn't look to local school board members for comment on an issue between two Congress members from out of state. But, I was thinking about this. I go, who am I kidding? I made this comment on Twitter about it. Who am I kidding that nothing typifies the local Republican elected officials' mission more than ignoring actual local issues in favor of latching onto some national culture war fight in order to make yourself look like a rising star within the party. So did Abu Ismail have anything to say about Lauren Boebert's comments about Ilhan Omar or not? Good question. Probably never find an answer about that, but I was wondering whether he might say anything. And of course, anyway, nobody would say anything about it. And as Matt Negrin on Twitter observed, it should surprise no one that Boebert's racist attack and Kevin McCarthy's tacit, endorsement of it was not even mentioned once by any Sunday show. this past weekend because the network media is singularly focused on one mission, rehabilitating the image of the Republican Party so that they can report on everything as fair and balanced. So anyway, that happened. And I guess Nancy Mace, after spending most of the last couple of days spreading misinformation about COVID and the vaccine to those who were susceptible to it and looking like a normal person to those who are inclined to believe she might be normal or who might buy into it if they saw her act normal on television. I don't know, maybe she felt like she had to play both sides on that one. But I guess someone asked her about the Lauren Boebert, Ilhan Omar thing, and she must have said, yeah, that's bad, and Lauren Boebert should apologize for it. And that has, what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene, upset with Nancy Mace, tweeting this morning, Nancy Mace is the trash in the GOP conference, never attacked by Democrats or rhinos, parentheses, same thing, because she is not conservative. She's pro-abort, as she puts it. Mace, no punctuation. Mace, you can back up off of Lauren Boebert or just go hang with your real gal pals, the Jihad Squad. You're, Y-O-U-R, out of your league. So, okay, wrong you're, certainly. And then, of course, just a little bit of Dems in disarray. Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene now having to fight. This, by the way, would be, let's see, I don't know, the 7th or 8th fight picked with other members of Congress by Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I think the ones that have been splashy and made headlines, by the way, all women. She fights with every other woman in Congress. And it's a little weird, and they should look into it. And they really ought to protect themselves by expelling her, of course. We all agree on that. It just can't happen. But that's part of the reason why they don't allow her on any committees. You never know what kind of fight she's going to pick in a committee. And they really should just wheel her around like Hannibal Lecter at this point and keep everybody as safe as possible. So anyway, she wanted Lauren Boebert to, I don't know what. She wanted Lauren Boebert to prevail in this fight. Boebert, by the way, I also understand her latest story for fundraising purposes, maybe, is that she called Ilhan Omar to, well, she says to apologize, except like she had already made a public non-apology saying something like, well, I apologize to anybody in the Muslim community I might have offended, as though there were Muslims who were not offended. But also, by the way, I have to note for the record, she offended a lot more people than just Muslims. I mean, there are also people who aren't Muslim who recognize when someone is being maligned for their religion and they don't like it and they feel offended by that. Like, I don't know, me. Anyway, she never got it, but whatever. I guess there was enough pressure on her that she decided to issue the standard Republican non-apology. Sorry if I offended anyone, whoever they might be, and whatever their reasons are. Word apology has been mentioned, and so get off my case. But it didn't really work. So apparently she made a phone call to Omar, and Omar reports that she accepted the phone call. And it was more of the same. She basically did the same thing and gave more non-apology and said more stupid and offensive things, and she hung up on her. And then Lauren Boebert went and tried to fundraise off of the fact that she hung up on her. So, Ilhan Omar is the real aggressor and the real wrongdoer in this, this exchange, and something give me money, I guess. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. So now we're at the stage, I guess no one else is looking at it this way, but I will. She calls Ilhan Omar and gives her more trouble. So basically now Boebert is now making harassing phone calls to Ilhan Omar and probably ought to be arrested for that. She calls up and, yells at her some more. Ilhan Omar issued a statement about it yesterday, saying, well, let's see. I don't know when the phone call was, but the statement says, today I graciously accepted a call from Representative Lauren Boebert in the hopes of receiving a direct apology for falsely claiming that she met me in an elevator. So there was not even an elevator encounter at all, suggesting I was a terrorist and for a history of anti-Muslim hate. Instead of apologizing for Islamophobic comments and fabricated lies, Boebert refused to publicly acknowledge her hurtful and dangerous comments. She instead doubled down on her rhetoric, and I decided to end the unproductive call. She goes on to say, I believe in engaging with those we disagree with respectfully, but not when the disagreement is rooted in outright bigotry and hate. There's more, but you get the idea, and of course the Republican leadership doing nothing about it, and likely won't, and there you go. But it should be noted that well, the reality, the bottom line of this is we now have Lauren Boebert making more annoying, harassing telephone calls to Ilhan Omar. That should be added to the list. If you've got a call to apologize, you're going to have to do it. You can't have it blow up in your face and then say, well, I called. That's not helpful. The call was harassment. Anyway, I just found that whole story, somewhat somewhat enlightening, just to let you know sort of where Republican minds are these days and how they're acting out again, and they continue to do this, and how Marjorie Trader Greene has involved herself in it. So there you go. Oh, and by the way, I would also point out, as Marjorie Trader Greene said, what did she say? Mace, you can back up off Lauren Boebert or just go hang with your real gal pals, the Jihad Squad. If a Democrat had said this, I suggest to you that the Republican outrage machine would be pumping this story up 24/7, saying that the use of the word hang was a threat to the physical safety of Nancy Mace, and she should be expelled for making a death threat against her. And then, I don't know what would happen. If it was a Democrat, they'd have to apologize and say, that's not what I meant. Republicans will just go on as usual and do nothing, and no one will make a big deal of it. And there you go. Fair and balanced somehow. Okay, let's see. Other stories that I want to share with you. There are several others. The Guardian out with a story today that mostly confirms everything we thought or knew or thought we knew about January 6th, the new-ish nugget of information, which I think this is, I guess, new proof of something that happened that we all assumed had happened anyway. Their piece, let's go over to the original here. Trump called aides hours before, we got to get rid of all the pop-ups. Trump called aides hours before Capitol riot to discuss how to stop Biden victory. I guess the new nugget of information here is that he was in touch probably from the Oval Office or possibly earlier in the day from the residence where he, I guess, prefers to make a lot of his phone calls. But from the White House by phone with the so-called war rooms at the Willard Hotel, including where, let's see, John Eastman was and Rudy Giuliani was, and where Steve Bannon was, and a couple other names are on the list who were staying at the Willard Hotel, and in touch with them and speaking with them live on January 6th about what to do now that he, I guess, apparently called them to tell them, yeah, I talked to Mike Pence about doing his part in this, and he's not going to do it, so what are our plan B, C, D, through whatever. And some interesting nuggets in here. I mean, it's not terribly overlong, but let's see. I'll skim it and read the parts that I think we need to know rather than, but it's going to sort of require skimming along while I'm doing the show. So it's either read it or just, have some dead air and then discuss it. But let's see. Some of the other names that were mentioned as staying there. Also, Boris Epstein was there. I guess that's the only name that's listed here that I missed. A couple sources insisting on anonymity said that they understood that the calls had been made. Trump's remarks reveal a direct line from the White House and the command center, at the Willard. That's really two But okay. The conversations also show Trump's thoughts appear to be in line with the motivations of the pro-Trump mob, that carried out the Capitol attack and halted Biden's certification until it was later ratified by Congress. No mention in here, by the way, of the fact that there was no security alert at the White House. I still think that's an underappreciated story, but gee whiz, his thoughts appear to be in line with the motivations of the pro-Trump mob. I mean, I think we all guessed that, but I guess we're still trying to establish it somehow, and maybe the calls will help do it, except there's no indication whether there's any recordings of the calls or any transcripts of the calls, even though they were made from the White House. There's some discussion of the thing. I didn't understand this to be the case, but they say in this story that Trump may have made the call from the Oval Office because there aren't automatically created records of phone conversations made from the Oval Office, which you would think there would be. And I don't really know why there isn't, and whether they have that right or have it backwards. But anyway, other pieces of this column. The former president's call to the Willard Hotel about stopping Biden's certification is increasingly a central focus of the House Select Committee's investigation into the Capitol attack, as it raises the specter of a possible connection between Trump and the insurrection. Wow. But they're trying to establish it as evidence for a court case, courtroom-style evidence that will lock things down. Several Trump lawyers at the Willard that night deny Trump sought to stop the certification of Biden's election win. They say they only considered delaying Biden's certification at the request of state legislators because of voter fraud. So that's the legal line there. We weren't trying to stop the certification of Biden's election win. We were trying to give the states time to do what they said they wanted to do, except no state really wanted to do this. And even the states he called and demanded that they do it didn't say they were going to do it. But some Republicans in those state legislatures would surely say, I wanted to do it. They just didn't have the majority that they needed. But he was going to delay things in order to give them time to muster that majority, I guess, through whatever tactics. The former president made several calls to the lieutenants at the Willard the night before January 6th. He phoned the lawyers and non-lawyers separately, as Giuliani did not want non-lawyers to participate on legal calls and jeopardize attorney-client privilege. Instead, he left that, I guess, up to the crime-fraud exception to attorney-client privilege, and will lose on that front, or would under normal circumstances. Let's see. Trump's call to the lieutenants came a day after Eastman outlined at a January 4th meeting at the White House how he thought Pence could usurp his role in order to stop Biden's certification from happening at the joint session. At the meeting, we know about the meeting and who was there. Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, his legal counsel, Greg Jacob. Eastman outlines the memo. Eastman, by the way, also in here saying, told The Guardian last month, the memo only presented scenarios, not intended as advice. He says, the advice I gave the vice president very explicitly was that I did not think he had the authority simply to declare which electors to count. But he could recognize objections and delay things enough so that the plan was for state legislatures to be cajoled into sending alternative slates of electors. Not that it looked like that was ever going to happen, but that was the thinking. And at some point in this article, Rudy Giuliani is quoted as saying, what we want to do is delay things so that we pass calendar January 6th into January 7th, preferably the end of January 7th, to give the state legislators time and to throw off the schedule. If, the Constitution demanded that January 6th, or the Electoral Count Act probably demanded that January 6th be the day that this be finalized, they felt like there was some magic power to delaying it to the 7th, saying, well, we're already off schedule, so we might as well just keep waiting and get it, quote unquote, right. Anyway, from the White House, Trump made several calls to lieutenants, including Giuliani, Eastman, Epstein, and Bannon, who were huddled in suites complete with espresso machines and Cokes in a mini fridge in the northwest corner of the hotel. Let's see. On the calls, the former president first recounted what had transpired in the Oval Office meeting with Pence, informing Bannon and the lawyers at the Willard that his vice president appeared ready to abandon him at the joint session in several hours' time. He's arrogant, Trump, for instance, told Bannon of Pence. His own way of communicating that Pence was unlikely to play ball in an exchange reported in Peril, the book Robert Costa and Bob Woodward wrote, and confirmed by The Guardian. And let's see, on at least one of those calls, Trump also sought from the lawyers at the Willard ways to stop the joint session to ensure Biden would not be certified as president on January 6th as part of a wider discussion about buying time to get states to send Trump electors. The fallback that Trump and his lieutenants appeared to settle on was to cajole Republican members of Congress to raise enough objections so that even without Pence adjourning the joint session, the certification process would be delayed for states to send Trump slates. It was not clear whether Trump discussed on the call about the prospect of stopping Biden's certification by any means if Pence refused to insert himself in the process, but the former president is said to have enjoyed watching the insurrection unfold from the dining room. But the fact that Trump considered ways to stop the joint session may help to explain why he was so reluctant to call off the rioters and why the Republican Senator Ben Sasse told the conservative talk show host Hugh Hewitt that he heard Trump seemed delighted about the attack. Well, the lead Trump lawyer at the Willard, was Giuliani, appeared to follow that fallback plan and called at least one Republican senator later that same evening to ask him to help keep Congress adjourned and stall the session beyond January 6th. For whatever reason. The only strategy, he says, we can follow is to object to numerous states and raise issues so that we get ourselves into tomorrow, ideally the end of tomorrow, Giuliani said. Well, spokesperson for Trump said, it's totally false. Trump made several calls the day before the Capitol attack from both the White House residence, his preferred place to work, as well as the West Wing, but it was not certain from which location he phoned his top lieutenants at the Willard. The White House residence and its yellow Oval Room, they capitalize yellow like it's supposed to be called the Yellow Oval Room, otherwise known as the Oval Office. A Trump favorite is significant since communications there, including from a desk phone, are not, it says, automatically memorialized in records sent to the National Archives after the end of an administration. They did not realize that. But even if Trump called his lieutenants from the West Wing, the Select Committee may not be able to fully uncover the extent of his involvement in the events of January 6th, unless House investigators secure testimony from individuals with knowledge of the calls. That difficulty arises since calls from the White House are not necessarily recorded, and call detail records that the Select Committee is suing, in fact, to pry free from the National Archives over Trump's objections about executive privilege only show the destination of the calls. The House Select Committee investigators this month opened a new line of inquiry into activities at the Willard Hotel, issuing subpoenas to Eastman and former New York Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, an assistant to Giuliani. The chair of the Select Committee, Benny Thompson, said in a statement that the panel was pursuing the Trump officials at the Willard to uncover every detail about their efforts to overturn the election, including who they were talking to in the White House and in Congress. So, again, feels like stuff we knew to be the case, but I guess the news is that they've nailed these things down in ways that would make good evidence, acceptable evidence in court. Okay, so that's good. There are a couple of other stories to get to, some of which definitely are longer pieces, and I'll have to save for after the break. But some more interesting news from Virginia. And it's not exactly related to the gubernatorial election or the school board disruptions or what happened in Spotsylvania County. But it holds out some interesting promise for dealing with the phenomenon, perhaps, around the country, wherein lunatics are attempting to take over government at the local level. This has been a long-standing project for them, but they're having some considerable success in taking over school boards in the wake of, widespread protests about masking and over vaccination and over the fake controversy surrounding CRT and other fake controversies surrounding transgender issues. there's just a ripe field of issues to, experiment with and see what catches fire in your area and use it as cover to elect either fundamentalist Christian weirdos or other kinds of weirdos to the school boards and impose the sort of agenda that will make normal people uncomfortable once it's revealed, but during the campaign is disguised to look like something you might actually discuss at your kitchen table. I just saw, and I should scroll back for the tweet from the other day about what's happening in Colorado on this front. And then I can share with you after the break what I'm thinking of that happened recently in Virginia that is not directly related, but might, as I said, hold some promise of a solution. It might not be applicable in every state. It might just be something that worked in Virginia because of the way we structure things here. But we'll see if we can find out. All right, let's see. Where was this thing? I'm going to scroll a little bit. There it is. Frederick Clarkson, who tracks such things, reporting on it in religiondispatches.org under the very interesting headline of "Baby, we were born for war," like not born to run, but born for war. To Dominionist Christian groups, no election is too small, and Colorado is just the beginning. The tweet itself, Frederick was saying, Dominionists who were, quote, born for war, claim a beachhead in Colorado school board races, and Colorado is, of course, just the beginning. And a rather, not that long, but a lengthy article about how this is happening nationally in some of the places where it's taking hold, and of course what they're seeking to do with their new seats on the board, which they gain through, like I said, campaigning on these hot button issues, proven to bring people out to the polls in numbers, so you can get them to object to these culture war issues, and just say you're on their side and don't discuss the deeper mission that you plan for the school board once you get there, and only reveal it once it's too late. But is it too late? I guess that's part of what we're learning from the example in Virginia. Granted, it's happening at the PTA level and at the school board level, so it's different. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, okay, we'll just take a break for a second to note for the record. I do understand this to be the case, and I was trying to be a little bit more cautious about it. But Ricky pointing out here that about our Republican friend from Spotsylvania County, that just because someone is Lebanese doesn't mean they are also Muslim. No, of course not. There's a huge Christian population in Lebanon. A lot of Lebanese emigrated to North America because they were being persecuted as Christians. That is true. My guess is that they tend not to go by Abu Ismail. That's what made me think he might be Muslim. I mean, it's an Arabic name, and I mean, you can be an Arabic Christian, true, and I mean, there is actually room for that. But I don't know, the Arabic Christians I've run into tended to avoid names that were more associated with practice of Islam. Although, again, Arabic, just as a vernacular language, is available to them as for surnames. And of course, it's also possible, and might even be the case, given that it's a fairly radical Republican young man, that his parents are Muslim and he's a practicing Christian, a converted Christian. That's entirely possible too. But yeah, Rabih, R-A-B-I-H, Abu Ismail is a name that hints at Muslim roots, certainly. Whether he continues to practice or not, I can't tell. There's just not enough information about, again, a guy who's a 20-something school board member. As a rising Republican star, he's going to be very reluctant to advertise that he is Muslim in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. It's not going to help. So I went looking around, like campaign materials or bios, and there's nothing that discusses it, but there's also nothing that says he's a practicing Christian, which is something that you probably would emphasize in running for a Republican office in Spotsylvania County. And I say Republican office. He's also is or has recently been the chair of the Spotsylvania County Republican Organization, I believe, or one or another of them, whether it's the county committee or the congressional district committee that overlaps that county. But I did find a citation to him as being one of the local Republican leaders, in addition to being now an elected member of the school board. I also did find some information about, I guess campaign information about his background, in which I thought this was carefully worded. He doesn't say he's a practicing Muslim. He also doesn't say he's a practicing Christian, but he says he's involved in volunteering at a local Christian church. Not that he worships there or is a member of the congregation, but is involved in volunteer activity. So this leads me to believe that, between that and the fact that he's, Lebanese and goes by Abu Ismail, leads me to believe that he might be, in fact, Muslim and just not discussing it very widely because it would be a political liability for him to do so. So, yes, it's an assumption on my part, but we have to assume something here in order to discuss why I would be interested in the story at all. But you might wonder, or at the very least, you might wonder why a Lebanese Christian is not concerned about discrimination against Muslims. Likely he would have been surrounded by Muslim neighbors all of his life, whether he was ever living in Lebanon or not. He would have some concern about that. And in Northern Virginia, where there's he's not quite Northern Virginia, but he's not too far out of the region that you would consider Northern Virginia. There's a pretty sizable Muslim population, and elected officials are expected to acknowledge that they might feel singled out by activity like this. And we just wonder, where his head is in all of this. Anyway, I was headed towards another Virginia story, and I've only got the one more segment to do it before we welcome Joan for today and get the welcome chance to relieve ourselves, but you could do that too, but not on the show. Relieve ourselves of this burden of all these hyper-localized stories about weirdos and idiots and Virginia, which goes hands in hand, I guess, sometimes. I mentioned to you, I guess as part of a setup, Frederick Clarkson having written this piece for Religion Dispatches, Baby, We Were Born for War, and about Dominionist Christian groups targeting local elections. Let me just lay that down as background. The piece begins this way. The quote, "Man, as many people as we have in this school here, we ought to take over Woodland Park." Thus spake theocratic leader Andrew Womack, Wommack, as at a political mobilization conference in April at the Charis, Charis, Charis Bible College that he heads. That is a Bible college with a political mobilization conference at it, and check their 501c status. He hasn't yet taken the town, but the 4-candidate slate for the school board, backed by his Truth and Liberty Coalition, won their races in November of 2021. That would be like now, this month, earlier, to take control of the 5-member board. 4 out of the 5 members of the school board now. It's a start, but Womack's ambitions, though, like those of the movement of which he's a part, are national, international, and eternal, and part of an end times war that's currently underway. What had been, until recently, sleepy school board races across the state and the country, this year became political hot potatoes. The Colorado media generally cast these contests as battles between conservative groups and teachers' unions, and that the results were mixed. But lost in this framing was the quiet electoral pilot project of the Truth and Liberty Coalition, the other arm of Womack's political and educational empire, and their out-of-state partner, the Texas-based Wall Builders organization. And what do you think the Wall Builders might be about? As Religion Dispatches reported in October, this initiative targeted 17 school boards. Their visible source of support for their candidates came in the form of voter guides in English and Spanish, Wall Builders, intended for use with churches. Consistent with the culture-warring themes of the Christian right in the past year, the guides asked candidates to agree or disagree with 5 statements regarding critical race theory, all this stuff is in quotes here, parental rights, boys playing girl sports, and that's how they did it, that's sick for that, not girls sports, but girl sports, sex education, and gender identity pronouns. So basically like the last 3 and maybe 4 of those 5 issues are all one, sliced into thinner slices, thinner tranches, if you will. The fine print at the bottom of each voter guide illuminates the institutional relationships between the partner organizations behind it. It says, this election guide has been approved for use in churches by a constitutional attorney, maybe, licensed to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court. Who? I don't know. Documentation may be accessed at ChristianVoterGuide.com, paid for by Truth and Liberty Coalition, One Innovation Way, Woodland Park. Gives you the address. Billy Epperhart, registered service agent, in case you want to sue us for it, which you should. Epperhart is the CEO of Andrew Womack Ministries, by the way, and Charis Bible College. The link takes you to the website Christian Voter Guide, published by the Aledo, Texas Wall Builders, a dominionist Christian nationalist organization founded by David Barton and now run by his son Tim Barton. I don't know if they're related to noted pervert Joe Barton or not. The school board, no reason to believe so, but the school board races were the pilot project in a long-term campaign by the Truth and Liberty Coalition and its de facto training institute nearby Charis Bible College in Woodland Park, a suburb of Colorado Springs. As RD, Religion Dispatches, reported, the unaccredited school teaches its students how to conquer the, quote, 7 mountains of society: government, religion, family, education, media, arts and entertainment, and business. Arts and entertainment is one. Those are the 7 mountains. In order to achieve Christian dominion, this theology and its praxis is known as 7 Mountains Dominionism, or 7M for short, in case you're looking for the code. And its political conferences are open to a wider community of like-minded Christians. The main leaders of the Colorado campaign are Texas-based David and Tim Barton of Wall Builders, 7M theorist Lance Wallnau, and Andrew Womack, who heads a growing education, political, and broadcasting empire of increasing national consequence. Wall Builders was also one of the architects of the stealthy state legislative campaign Project Blitz, linked herein, and you can read more about that. 9 candidates who won their races for 4-year terms on 3 large school boards in the Colorado Springs area scored 100% on the Truth and Liberty Coalition's voter guide. These wins flipped board control from Democratic to Republican. The same candidates were also backed and substantially bankrolled by a mysterious Republican-oriented entity, the Springs Opportunity Fund, which provided more than $57,000 to the candidates. The Springs Opportunity Fund, formed in February of this year, is one of dozens of political committees set up over the past decade by tax attorney Kathleen A. Kennedy, also known as Katie Kennedy, of Denver. No one knows who turned on the dark money spigot, but there was no question that these races were awash in more cash than they'd ever seen in a school board race. In Colorado Springs, District 11, 3 candidates whose views conform to the Truth and Liberty voter guide won seats on the 7-member board. One of the winners was Reverend Al Loma, a senior pastor at Victory Outreach Church, who defeated the incumbent board president by 1,000 votes. In Academy District 20, the region's largest school district, their candidates won 3 of the 5 seats on the board to take control. 3 coalition-backed candidates also took control of the 5-member board in Falcon School District 49. In the western city of Grand Junction, in Mesa County Valley School District 51, 3 candidates who answered correctly on the coalition's issues swept the 3 open seats to take control of the 5-member board. The races for Mesa 51 were the focus of a feature story on BuzzFeed News and critical reporting by local blogger Ann Landman. The slate was also endorsed by the Chamber of Commerce, the Republican Party, and by a far-right group, Stand for the Constitution. These races may seem like small beer to those who only look at the big picture, but they may very well be harbingers of a changing big picture. This is how the Christian right and their allies will create a new wave of political base building for lasting power and influence. They may not succeed, but their intentions are clear, even if their visions sometimes vary. The victorious coalition-supported candidates in Grand Junction may be the most colorful, as well as the most controversial slate in the state. Angela Lima is the proprietor of a cosmetology school, and Will Jones works at a strip club. Ann Landman reported that local realtor Andrea Haitz, Haitz, along with the entire slate, was endorsed by Stand for the Constitution, the extreme right-wing group that has been demanding the county commissioners declare Mesa County a constitutional sanctuary where state and federal laws don't apply. Isn't Mesa County where they arrested the clerk in Colorado the other day for tampering with the voting machines? Wouldn't it be great if it was also a constitutional sanctuary? The commissioners unanimously rejected Stand for the Constitution's demand to do this because doing so would not only violate state and federal laws, but their oaths of office as well. So, that's of some interest, according to the local blogger. That's Ann Landman. Let's see. Where were we with this? Oh, yes. The coalition's 100%ers, the ones who got 100% on the quiz, I guess, the candidate questionnaire, had mixed success elsewhere, but there's an old saying that if you don't play, you don't win. What's more, it's also said that sometimes there's even winning and losing. This is especially so when a movement is seeking to build for the long term power and control. In all, 21 candidates who scored 100% on the Truth and Liberty Coalition voter guide won seats on school boards. Of these, 12 now have voting control of 4 school districts. The Truth and Liberty Coalition did well on its first outing, even if the results were mixed. Beyond the big wins in Colorado Springs, Grand Junction, and their hometown of Woodland Park, their success elsewhere cannot be measured entirely by the score. For example, the voter guides and their candidates were able to focus on and frame their 5 issues in their target communities, primarily conservative churches, in this disruptive and disingenuous fashion. This was important because it shifted concerns away from the traditional wonkery of school budgets, curricula, and test scores, and thrust the races deep into contemporary culture war issues, especially via the new gateway into the Christian right, parents' rights. Here's the rundown of the rest of the races with links to the local voter guide and the results in each race. In Elizabeth School District C1, coalition candidates won the 4-way race to fill 3 board seats, taking control of the 5-member board in rural Elbert County. In Aspen School District 1, only 1 candidate scored 100%, and he was elected. Or she, I'm not certain. But in Brighton School District 27J, a coalition candidate flipped 1 Democratic seat. Only one of a coalition-backed slate of candidates won a seat in the Durango School District 9R. A coalition candidate won a seat on the Bayfield 10 School District, JTR, and another won the seat in the Ignacio School District, JT Board, in the city of Durango. I don't know what all the JT and the codes are, but that's what it says. Coalition candidates won 2 of the 3 seats on the ballot for the Estes Park School District, R3. In Widefield School District 3, 2 of the 3 coalition-backed candidates also won their races. In Cherry Creek School District 5, none of the 3 candidates scoring 100% on the coalition guide took either of the 2 races. Everybody hang out in Cherry Creek, I guess, but move and vote elsewhere. Anyway, in Cheyenne Mountain School District 12, coalition candidates lost to 2 incumbents. In Montrose County School District RE1J, coalition-backed candidates lost in 3 contested races contested in Poudre, P-O-U-D-R-E, Poudre School District R1. There were 11 candidates running for 4 seats. None of the 4 coalition candidates, thankfully, won their races. And the 4-candidate coalition slate lost their races in Thompson School District R2J. So congratulations to those of you who defeated them, if you're listening. But this is part of a much-discussed national trend of increasingly contested school board races. In addition to recognizing that the theocratic principles in the Truth and Liberty Coalition have national standing, it's worth noting that just like in past waves of fresh political action, there are other organizations doing similar things for similar reasons, often in close collaboration. Their impact is undoubtedly greater than the sum of their parts in the movement. One such group is called Church Voter Guides. You know about them from earlier mention. Launched in 2021 by former Colorado Springs megachurch pastor Steve Holt. Targeted some of the same school board races as the Truth and Liberty Coalition. In fact, they're close allies. The coalition issued a press release promoting the voter guides of both groups on October 5th. It's the second church voter guide group. Casting the election as a referendum on parental rights. Guess where they got that language? The group insists it's better to be biblically correct than politically correct. They also declare, when the citizenry do not seek to be obedient to God's law, they vote in wicked and corrupt candidates who then trample underfoot the God-given liberties of the people. It's automatic, you know. How much more is there? No, just a little bit. We'll run through it. 9 days before the election, Holt announced during Sunday services at his new, much smaller church, The Road at Chapel Hills, that's the name of the church, The Road at Chapel Hills, with an @ sign, that 3 members of his church were running for school boards in 2 districts. All 3 went on to win. Aaron Salt in Academy District 20, and 2 of the 3 members of the winning and coalition-backed slate in District 49, Lori Thompson and Ivy Liu, L-I-U. Holt asked for a show of hands of people who live in each of the 3 school districts. This is pretty specific for inside a church. District 11, Academy District 20, and District 49. Towards the end of the service, he pointed people to stacks of 30,000 cards for parishioners to use to organize people to visit their online voter guide. So if there is someone who you really don't think shares your values, then don't give them the card, Holt declared with a twinkle in his eye. No, I'm only kidding, he concluded. Andrew Womack was present, along with another member of a slate who wasn't a church member, and just a hint that his congregants are part of something greater than themselves, Holt also said he had met 2 nights before with former Trump CIA Director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who may run for president, of course, and Representative Doug Lamborn of Colorado, Republican, obviously. The following Sunday, just before the Tuesday election, he continued to emphasize the school board races and the role of local churches while denouncing the, quote, Marxist philosophies that are coming out of the White House. He said, "We are seeing conservative evangelicals rising up, and I want that to be our prayer so we can see more godly Christian presence in our country and in our city." He called for a kingdom of God revolution in our time, and he prayed, may this state in the years ahead run red with the blood of Jesus. May this city run red with the blood of Jesus. May this country run red with the blood of Jesus. It's very big. As disturbingly ambiguous and unexplained as this prayer was, he also left people with a further mixed message. Holt said he wanted members of the Road to be seen as the most loving, kind people in the city. But, he averred, that we also don't lay down for falsehood, lies, deception, and evil, but we are known as a people who stand up for truth and might kill you because of how loving and kind we are. He prayed that God would elect them to the school boards. He also prayed that these county superintendents wake up and smell the coffee, and that we are not going to be pushed around and let our children be taught a bunch of crap. The title of Holt's sermon these 2 Sundays, Born for War. The rise of such groups and politicians who pander to them is likely to be part of what the new normal looks like, and not just in Colorado. So you're on notice. Be aware of that. I mentioned that there was a Virginia angle. Not on this. Slightly different. And happening in a bluer area, pretty solidly blue northern Virginia, where Loudoun County lies. And reminder, Loudoun County remains pretty solidly blue despite all of the bad publicity. And the the area focused on by Glenn Youngkin pretty soundly rejected him for governor, but overruled, I guess, by Southwest Virginia and their Republican MAGA turnout. Anyway, and by the way, I guess the resulting analysis of some of the various pundits and Democratic consultant types is that it didn't work to paint Glenn Youngkin as Trump. But we'll see whether it works or not once the policies begin getting made, both statewide and in some of these school boards. It was never that he's Trump, i.e. he paints himself orange. It was that he would facilitate very Trumpy and maybe even exclusively Trumpist policy. And why they couldn't make that distinction, I don't know. Anyway, happening in Northern Virginia is we have in this area a magnet high school, the Thomas Jefferson School for Science and whatever the hell else it's the school for. But trust me, it's a school for science. It's a science and technology high school, and I can't remember the full name for it, but it's locally referred to as TJ, Thomas Jefferson. And, very exclusive in the sense that you have to test very highly to get in. It's very competitive. And, there's this one school and the whole region participates in it. So some of these kids go, on the bus for an hour plus each way to bus all the way down to TJ. It's very advantageous if you're aiming at an elite college admission to get in there. And there's been a lot of controversy over the admissions policies and how they want to encourage diversity in the school. And that's been a point of contention, therefore, among the Parent-Teacher Association, or the Parent-Teacher-Student Association, as they have there, the PTSA. And I heard this story. Actually, my brother was telling me about this over the weekend, that the parents... there was a lot of disagreement over a lot of policies, including either the proposal to change admissions policies slightly or the new admissions policies as changed. Big controversy and a big fight, and a similarly staged fight in which some of the parents who were on the crazier side and, a little more apt to engage in the culture war side of things, had in fact engineered a big win for themselves on the PTSA board. Because, generally speaking, although these are highly involved parents and everything with high achieving kids, they don't necessarily concern themselves with attending every PTSA meeting. And as we've discussed in the past, all it takes is a very small cadre of like-minded voters to show up and change the direction of the composition of the leadership boards of these places. And that happened here. And then they, quickly careered off the cliff and went crazy. And the parents, a very moderate and, probably very Democratic voting bunch, given that they're Northern Virginians. And all they really are looking for here is smooth sailing for their kids to do their best, graduate, and apply to elite schools and go on to their careers that they feel like, the path is laid out for their kids. They've done the hard work. They got the kids in. They just want everything to be normal. But now they find themselves with a PTSA dominated by kooks. And so kooky that they wanted to do something about it. And apparently they've actually appealed to the state. There's like a state, PTA association that certifies and I guess charters PTAs around the state. And they found the lunatics there basically to be so off their rockers that they threatened to decertify the Thomas Jefferson PTSA unless they straightened their act out or I might have even found some voting irregularities and said, this board is suspended until it either changes its ways or its composition. I have to get more detail on this, except that once again, we're running up against our break and we want to make room for Joan to bring us back to national issues. But I want to plant the seed for this and share with you, and maybe I'll do some more research and get some better, more comprehensive explanations of the background and how we landed where we are. But I wanted to bring this up as a possibility. I don't know if it can happen with school boards the same way it can with PTAs, but there might be, I want to hold out the prospect so we go looking and research it. Are there ways to put a stop, or at least apply the brakes, where lunatics have engineered a takeover of local elected officialdom? And I don't know. It's very interesting. And with Republicans having concentrated their fire on other places, well, unfortunately, I guess I wonder if it falls for school board elections to the state secretary of state, another job targeted by Republicans, with the idea of handing elections over to Donald Trump later. I guess along the way they can hand elections over to school board members. We'll explore this avenue sometime soon. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Now joining us, of course, Joan McCarter. And, well, good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning. Happy government shutdown week.
Oh, that, right. I really did literally forget about that. We were just chatting about, all right, well, what can we talk about? There's stuff. There's nothing huge right now, but there's that, isn't
there?
Friday. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for reminding us.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Okay. Okay, so Friday, and it's Tuesday now, and they have a couple of days to, CR,
a couple of days to figure it out, and very little help from Mitch McConnell in doing so, as usual.
Of course, okay. Yeah, I imagine they're probably thinking, oh, well, if we block everything, we can say Joe Biden shut down the government because something, even though, there's a quantum difference between like when Trump was saying, yeah, I'm not going to sign anything. I am single-handedly going to shut down the government, versus Joe Biden saying, please pass this thing and keep the government open. And Republicans just saying, well, we'll just use the rules of the Senate to block it. How is that Joe Biden? I don't know, but ask NBC News. That they'll figure out some
right. I think that they'll probably let it pass. They're just going to make this week as difficult as they possibly can.
Okay.
Just because they can. Like yesterday. One of the thing that, Congress always does, they pass the defense spending bill. In fact, this year they added $24 billion to it that the Pentagon didn't want.
Oh, well. What do you know?
Because this is just how Congress deals with the defense bill.
Yeah,
and so Schumer tried to bring it up yesterday, tried to have a cloture vote for it, because, they pretty much, among all of the appropriations bills, that's the one that they figured out. But they didn't have an agreement on amendments because, of course, Republicans want unlimited amendments.
Yeah.
So they voted against cloture.
Sure, why not?
Because it's going to eat up more time.
Yeah.
And that was the lowest hanging fruit to get out of the way right away for Schumer. And, of course, they weren't going to let that happen.
Yeah. All right, so we see how this sets up. But they haven't been talking it up much, and it might be something that they're willing to do a short-term CR on. And although I recall from one of our previous discussions that the Democrats, too, are interested in a very shorter-term CRs, and I forget why that was.
A month or so ago, they were talking about just pushing it later into December, a week or two. Now they're saying, well, yeah, let's make it January.
Okay.
Which is a lot more realistic. I think they were thinking they would probably move faster on Build Back Better in the House. I think they thought they would have more momentum behind that, and thus could get it done faster, get it done possibly even before Thanksgiving. Those words had left Schumer's mouth at some point.
All right.
They've given up on that, obviously.
Yes.
So now they're talking January 21st or 28th. So end of January for the next continuing resolution. Republicans are saying, no, we want even more time. I mean, at one point, Republicans were saying, well, why don't we just do a full year continuing resolution? So fiscal year 2022 would actually be fiscal year 2021, lasting 2 years.
Yes, budget-wise. And, of course, they had more of a hand in shaping that budget because the other guy was president.
Right.
Okay.
I don't think that they're going to be able to do that.
All right. I mean, sometimes it makes sense to give yourself more time to work things out, but, the status quo, not something we want to preserve.
Well, things change. New variants of a pandemic-causing virus emerge.
Right.
And you want your government to be able to respond to it a little bit more quickly.
Yeah.
Perhaps with more money.
Right. Something that was totally ignored, obviously, by the Trump administration, so they wouldn't have had any real budget priorities keyed to fighting the pandemic because for some reason they wanted it to get worse and kill a lot of people. I don't know why they chose that, but that's just a Republican thing, I guess. And
yes, the Party of Life is just remarkably fine with mass death. I don't quite get that.
Yeah, well, they've never really been grounded in reality, and I don't know why that is. They're very disturbed individuals and don't belong in government, certainly, and society. Marginal question about whether they're worth it. But yeah, that's where they've positioned themselves. But that's why in times past, being offered a full year CR would seem like a pretty good solution. Like a normal budget had been passed, and you were dealing with normal and easily anticipated situations. Now, of course, we're well outside of that, and you really need to calibrate the budget to current times and reality, not to mention the political reality of having won the election. So that explains. And
having grand new things that have passed. I mean, if nothing else, the infrastructure bill is probably going to require some moving around of funds within various agencies, just like, the FCC and trying to handle getting broadband out to every place that doesn't have it, which, considering the FCC doesn't have good maps telling it where broadband isn't, they have a big challenge on their hands and are going to need some help in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. That's I think mostly, if not universally, then very widely endorsed goal, enhancing broadband in places where it doesn't exist. And I never stop to think, do they know where it doesn't exist? Like, do they know where to start digging for putting these cables in or anything? Because that would be important.
You assume that would be something, that would be easy to get your hands on. It's not, it turns out. I wrote about this yesterday, and I was kind of surprised at how bad the federal data is.
Huh.
They rely primarily on information submitted by the ISPs.
Okay.
And here's what this just blew me away. A provider can say that a census block has internet, has broadband coverage if one household in that census block has broadband.
Okay. And everybody goes over to that guy's house?
Yeah, I guess that's the assumption.
All right. I mean, it's available somehow, so therefore, I mean, do they have reason to not want to? I mean, I guess if it's being funded by the government, maybe they have reason to want to expand.
Well, and in fact, this is sort of surprising. The ISPs are saying, yeah, we've got to have much, much better information based on this. Of course they're saying this,
Yeah.
they see more customers, and they see the government footing the bill for extending the networks out there so that they don't have to pay for it and they can get more customers.
Yeah, I would think, but what a weird...
One official in Mississippi said that he thinks for one county in Mississippi, the numbers that the FCC has are as much as 80% off.
Oh. All right.
So,
well,
50% is, particularly in rural states, is pretty average. From what, there's a sort of a consumer advocacy organization, it's called Broadband Now, that actually relies upon ISPs for information, but they actually do surveys and look at data and go out into areas and see what's going on. In Arkansas, for example, the FCC thought that maybe 24% of households don't have broadband or access to broadband. Broadband Now says, no, it's 48% of households don't have it. So
that's not bad, 25%.
So we've got these wildly varying ideas. Georgia seems to be the only state in the country that actually knows. Has actually gone out and done the work, and they started it thinking that it was really going to be infrastructure week under Trump, and they wanted to be ready to get their money, so they figured it out and have been sitting on this data.
Prepared.
But then we're able to determine household by household during the pandemic which families didn't have internet for schools.
Ah, yeah.
And they seem to be the only state in the country that's actually done that.
That is weird. You'd think that would have been a big motivating factor that the schools would... You'd quickly find out, hey, these kids are enrolled in school and are not showing up online for class. That means something. We should find out what it means.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it. I mean, I guess it was such an emergency and it was just surviving day to day. And maybe there are probably some
and
states...
Georgia had already done a lot of the legwork to get to the point where they could do that identification.
Yeah, I guess there's logistics leading up to it. I would love to have this information, but it was legwork. You needed to do some work beforehand that we now can't do in the middle of the pandemic in order to get started. I guess there is that. Well, so good for them for being fooled into thinking Infrastructure Week was coming earlier. It helped.
Yeah.
All right.
It's really an interesting story, and it sort of tells. It's a story about regulatory capture. How much the ISPs have really controlled the FCC on internet issues. It's a story about just decentralization, how confused we are at the local, state, federal levels on something as basic as this. And one of the things that it raised a red flag for me was that there's already $350 billion out there for states on building out internet infrastructure just from COVID relief stuff. And none of that was specifically targeted toward the running the lines, the fiber, whatever. It was more, just here's a big pot of money for you to get people working and at school, and you figure out what you're going to do with it. Where that money is going, I think, is going to be something that's important to find out.
Yeah.
and how much of that money is going to end up in dodgy partnerships between not so concerned legislators
Yeah.
and various various ISPs and
Right.
operators that have dollar signs in their eyes.
Or yeah, outright things that
I
outright.
mean, that's just ripe for abuse, ripe
I
for
think you're
fraud.
right. I worry that other states or a couple of states. It turns out that when you leave things open, this used to be the Republican mantra, of course. Do things in block grants and give the states flexibility. They know best what they need on the ground, et cetera, et cetera. And it made a certain amount of logical sense. But now you find you put aside billions of dollars for COVID relief, and we're finding Republican governors saying, "Oh, I can use it for anything. I'll use it for things that undermine our ability to recover from the pandemic, so that we can blame Joe Biden for the continuance of the pandemic." Now, I'm wondering, are there people taking the money and saying, "Yeah, we'll use it to set up a state website where you can sign up for fake vaccine exemptions or something like that?"
Right.
Like, okay, well, it's broadband, sort of. I don't know. It's had something to do with the internet. I don't actually know what broadband is, so I can't help you with that. But, I know it has something to do with the tubes and a series of tubes. So, as far as I'm concerned, if I make a MySpace page that says, download this fake vaccine card, that I've done it. So,
Well, and even
okay.
for states where, you're not going to see that out and out abuse, if they don't have the information, the very basic information of where this money needs to go, then
Yeah,
how are they going to be deploying it effectively?
right. So they could deploy it ineffectively and say, well, we deployed it, give us more.
Right.
So, right, yeah, and we all know how that works from, past years, whether under the Trump administration or others, where just one, as you mentioned, the problem being regulatory capture. And ISP says, we're launching a community broadband expansion project. That's what it's called. Can we have some money? I guess so. It's an emergency situation. Here you go. And then they don't give anybody broadband, or they give a select few broadband, or it's,
Right. Or they keep up the practices that they've been doing all of these years, and huge chunks, almost always communities of color, are left behind.
Yes.
Because they do things like requiring credit checks and a permanent home address. You have to the account is locked down to the address versus the person. So there's nothing. It's one of the reasons why you see so much more activity from communities of color on wireless networks. Why cell phones have become such a critical thing for them, because it's easier when you're a renter to have that account that moves with you than trying to do something at a physical address.
Yeah, I mean, you're more mobile.
But, for rural communities, it's that they didn't want to get out and extend the lines out. They didn't want to do the physical work of getting the hardware available to these communities.
That's been
and probably
problem.
still don't, but if they can get the federal government to pay for that physical stuff,
then they'll go
are
ahead
they
and do it.
then going to still have the barriers to actually get accounts for the people in those communities?
Yeah, they could certainly. Yeah, they are masters at finding ways, aren't they? Whether the subject is expansion of broadband or voting rights, like ways of saying, how can we make sure that these people, and I mean these people, don't get access to this in ways that don't use phrases like these people, which get us in trouble. How can we do that? Yeah, give me some language that disguises it, that happens to work out the way we want, but is especially helpful if you can come up with some facially neutral way of discriminating against them, whether in voting rights or in broadband access. Well, it has to have a, it's attached
if
to
you're
the
the
address.
Postal
It's not
Service,
because
it's, efficiency.
Okay. Well, yeah, right. And that was always, I guess that was the excuse for rural communities, the efficiency thing. And same for broadband and postal service. But Yeah, they really are very well practiced at finding ways of doing that. And I don't know. I mean, you still have to pay the bills, so what's the problem, right? You know, you don't have to know what color people are if they pay their bills. You should be happy.
You should be, yes. But that's not the way the system works.
No, it's not. What a weird thing to do. If you want money, you know, the money's all the same color. What's the problem here? But and that's
back
supposed
to
to be
the
motivation.
FCC, though,
Yes,
and
okay.
back to the very packed schedule that the Senate
Oh, yes,
has.
right. Oh, and maybe not having a government, right? Yeah, go on.
They did do confirmation hearings for Rosenworcel and Gigi Sohn, or I think it's Gigi Sohn, who's going to be the other FCC commissioner, has hers this week, early this week.
Okay.
So they
That
do
was a big issue
have
last
a
week.
commissioner to vote on. Again, that's something that has to happen by the end of the month because her term expires, and I don't see a way around that. So just, toss that into the mix of things that absolutely has to happen.
Okay.
And the FTC zombie guy, they've got to deal with that one too.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
He's been approved by committee, so the new FTC commissioner has been approved. So
Okay, that seems like good news. I know that was the alert last week. And this week's big alert is your government's going to shut down unless you've...
Well, they've been passed through committee, but they still have to be confirmed. So
Yeah, so anything can happen there. I guess it could come out of nowhere, and there doesn't have to be a logical reason to block anybody. It's certainly something.
there's not going to be any reason, really, any logical reason, other than just creating headaches for Schumer and trying to jam up these last few weeks and prevent them from doing the big budget reconciliation bill, Build Back Better.
Yeah. So,
Which I don't know where we're at with that. Schumer said this morning, let's get it done by Christmas.
okay.
Manchin is saying, I was home in West Virginia at the grocery store and everybody's talking about inflation and we just can't do that.
What? Okay. I'm sure people are talking about inflation, but yeah,
Joe Manchin is not at the grocery store.
no, that's probably not happening. And I mean, is anybody scoring? They've been saying we'll wait for the CBO scoring. There's no indication that anything in Build Back Better is inflationary. That is, in fact, I think the opposite.
No. And everybody who's, Larry Summers, who said he thought the stimulus stuff from COVID relief was going to be inflationary. He's saying, no, this is not. There's just not going to be inflation out of this thing because a lot of it doesn't kick in until 2024 or later, and it's just not going to work that way. Manchin's just grasping for reasons because he doesn't want to do it. He wants to be obstructionist, and he wants to have people courting him. I don't know. I don't know his motivations.
Yeah, hard to know now because he's gotten most of the concessions he would have needed. And they needed to have Larry Summers in the grocery store in West Virginia. Make him go.
A week before last, even Sinema had been talking about inflation, which I don't understand. What we do know about them is that they are getting a lot of money from extremely wealthy Republican donors and are probably hearing, boy, it would be really good if you took more time on this. Boy, it'd be really good if you looked at this and really thought about how much you want to spend on people.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they just don't want a victory for Biden more than they, care for the economic growth that could come from passing the thing. They just don't want that to be credited to him. But it's just
the Republican donors don't.
Yeah, right.
And I, again, what motivates those two is a mystery. But apparently, they don't care enough. They're thinking that their reelection depends on them not making it easy. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not real sure. And even some of the usual suspects for taking the, contrarian views of these things, even from a Democratic perspective, like, I think Bill Sherrick comes to mind. He's
Yeah.
frequently saying, well, the moderates have a point here, and, this, that, and the other thing. And even I saw the other day saying, there's no reason in the world for Manchin to be interested politically in a delay for Build Back Better at this point. But he's doing it, so, any of the possible good intentions that you just don't agree with, but that might still be viewed as good intentions, don't explain it either. And we're at a loss. It must just be something, either he has no understanding of the economic forces involved and just thinks if it's a big number, it must mean, in the past, everyone has said that means inflation. And this is a big number, so it must mean inflation here too, even though everybody who knows what they're doing says no. But I know better. I remember in the 1990s and 80s when they said something inflation. So I'm just going to say that. Could that really be it? Could he really just not care about doing anything that much? That, boy, I hate working, so I'll just say inflation. It's got to be something else.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm loath to lay it at, and call it corruption unless I see something clearly. Look, this money went to this person and he did something otherwise inexplicable. But the problem is that there is money here and there is something inexplicable here, and I don't know what else to do.
Exactly. He's getting an awful lot of money from traditional GOP mega donors.
Yeah.
That we know. They're having fundraisers for him. He's going off to Dallas to have fundraisers in their mansions.
Okay.
They're setting up meetings with cinema. This we know.
Yeah.
They are getting that money. Is there a quid pro quo?
I guess.
The other thing we know is that they're raising specious objections to this big bill. So
yeah,
those are the knowns.
I guess I got to fill in the blanks here. I know about 2 + 2 = 4. I've got a 2 and I got a 4. Well, I don't know what goes here. Now, granted, it could be ×2, not +2. So I can't say for sure I know the entire equation. But it's getting tough to come to any other conclusion. Well, we'll see.
Okay, the other thing, debt ceiling.
Okay.
And we're looking probably at December 15th is the time when that has to be done. That's another one that could be done by budget reconciliation, and
Sure.
Manchin has not said he won't.
Okay.
So once again, are we going to do the smart thing? Are we going to add it to the Build Back Better budget reconciliation to get Manchin on board?
In 2 weeks? Yeah. No. I guess
Probably not.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like there's time to do that, and I think that the reason there's not time to do that is that other Democrats said we're not going to do things that way because reasons, and the only explanation that I've heard, like the first time around, was we want to put the Republicans on the spot and jam them, but they just don't respond very well to that, and they make such problems.
Although on this time around, McConnell actually has met with Schumer. Okay. They have been talking about it.
And it's hard to say that it didn't ultimately work last time, so that it might, they might come to the conclusion, well, it'll work again. Okay. I'm getting nervous, but I can't say that isn't true.
Right.
Right. They don't care if I'm nervous.
It remains astounding to me that we actually have half of the Senate not caring at all if we have a government that functions.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a threat to them if the government functions, and if it works the way it's normally supposed to work, this fun fantasy time that they've been having of whatever the hell we want to do, we can try, because to hell with the law is over, and they're sad about that, and or never learned how things were supposed to work in the first place. I don't know, but it doesn't sound very promising.
It doesn't sound very promising, and once again, we're just going to not have a very fun month.
Yeah, all right. Ugh.
Talk about the war on Christmas.
Yeah, I know, right? They insist on having it be a dismal season each year and worrying about whether or not the government is going to be able to function. All right, well, let's see. So Friday for government shutdown, which means that the next time you visit on Tuesday, we'll know what they did and for how long, or whether we're in a government shutdown.
We're not going to have a government shutdown at the end of the week.
Okay. In all
barring, I don't know, something ridiculous happening. It's going to happen. It's just how painful are they going to make the next 4 days in allowing that to happen.
Okay. So we should be operating with the government when we return, and we'll just see. Then we'll know how much flesh was taken for it. But we'll still be a week and a half from debt ceiling, which means that's plenty of time for them to keep screwing around. So that will be our worry next week.
That'll be the worry next week. Oh, and also tomorrow the Supreme Court's hearing the Mississippi abortion case.
Right. I didn't even get to that. Okay. Well, that'll be a worry starting tomorrow. And we'll visit with you and see whether that's been settled once and for all next Tuesday.
Or whether, all of the people of Texas still can't get an abortion.
Okay. All right. Well, the picture not exactly looking up, but I was pleased to have a short break in there. I hope you were too.
Any relaxation one gets from a short break is completely erased by Mitch McConnell and Joe Manchin.
All right. Well, thank you for coming by nonetheless. We'll talk with you again next week.
NetworksRadio.com.
Great.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Time now, of course, to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And speaking of cookbooks, I forgot to ask how the Turkey-less Thanksgiving went for Joan. So maybe I can find that out on Twitter. And you can all watch along. In the meantime, Justice will catch us up on another day when we ignored the national trends for the Picayune. Yeehaw!